Good evening. I'd like to call this Wednesday, 14th, 2023 meeting of the City of Manassas Park Farm Commission to order. The time is 7:09. My name is Lester Pickle. Sitting this evening are Martha Collier, John Evans, Ron Mensing, and Michael Beckett. First item is the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Collier, will you lead us, please? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I would care to make a motion to approve the agenda as is. Motion second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Next agenda item is adoption of minutes for the May 10th, 2023 meeting. Any changes for that minutes? I didn't have any either. So I am carrying a motion to adopt the meeting minutes for May 10th, 2023 meeting as is. Motion second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 4 with 1 abstention. Next agenda item is members of the public. Here this evening, wishing to speak. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on. New business, we have a public hearing, zoning ordinance text amendment, ZOTA number 23-04, MUD, uses and associated amendments. I'd like to open the public hearing. The time is 7:12. Administrator Barry, will you please come forward?
Thank you and good evening, everybody. This is a proposed zoning ordinance text amendment for specifically the MUD zoning district, the mixed use, the downtown mixed use district. This is a district that was specifically designed for the city center redevelopment district, and that is shown in the comprehensive plan. But really, as stated, there is a core area that's between Euclid Avenue and the railroad right-of-way, 280 feet on both sides. That's the core area where the MUD district is supposed to be implemented, and the uses allowed in that district is where those uses are supposed to be located. So it is very critical that we get the proper mix and use and variety of different uses in this district in our heart and core of the downtown, so we can have the synergy between the different uses as well as have a lot of human activity and interaction. So the main purpose of this amendment is to enumerate permitted, accessory, and conditional uses in the MUD district. You can see it in the ordinance. I'm not going to go over all the permitted uses, but one of the nice things about this amendment is it enumerates all the different uses instead of making a reference to B2 and the PF. So you see it right in this zoning text and the specific section of all the different uses. I just wanted to highlight a few of them: amusement centers, government structures, indoor recreation facilities, movie theaters, as well as transportation facilities, retail, and parks and open space. So the other, we have accessory uses, and we wanted to emphasize and highlight uses that we thought would be appropriate for the downtown core. The first bullet hasn't changed much. It's accessory uses that are incidental to permitted use. We certainly have something that accessory does not necessarily called out, and that could be several items. But one of them that we're specifically identifying is the live entertainment. We really kind of want that interaction with music or maybe even comedy for our downtown restaurant. So one of the provisions that we are certainly adding is to allow live entertainment that's only up to 20% of the seating area for the restaurant. So that gives them a little flexibility. In the existing MUD, that was a conditional use permit. So we wanted to at least allow some without having to go through that legislative process. And the other accessory use that we wanted to specifically identify is outdoor dining, and that again is associated with the restaurant. Here are the list of conditional uses. Again, we wanted to make sure for these specific, because of the intensity, that they do go through a legislative process through the planning commission and governing body to make sure that any transportation issues or noise issues can be properly handled. So you'll notice that live entertainment as a principal use is a conditional use here, as well as arenas. We have private clubs listed as a conditional use and religious institutions. And so nightclubs and dancing. So those type of uses that can have negative impacts on adjacent properties, we certainly still want to review those and have appropriate conditions based on the use. The other item that is essential for this amendment is the definition. We deleted commercial recreation facility. That was specifically defined, but it was too broad. There were basically every use you could imagine as a commercial recreation facility. We wanted to make sure that we had different entertainment uses that were more narrowly tailored. So we added a amusement center, which is a facility that specializes in electronic or mechanized games, such as video arcades and bowling alleys, and maybe indoor playgrounds. An arena is a venue where they have more than 2,060. So again, that could be a concert hall or a sports facility, if you will. And certainly we want to have conditions on that. And an arena is always a conditional use, not only in the MUT district, but in every zoning district where it will be permitted, but as a conditional use. We have indoor recreation facility, which is either a gym or a sports court, an indoor swimming pool, skating rink, and then outdoor recreation facility, which could be an outdoor swimming pool, golf, miniature golf, any of those outdoor activities. In the MUD district, youth centers and indoor recreation facilities are permitted uses, so they can, like as the only window is by right without any special approval. And an arena, as I mentioned, is a conditional use, and outdoor recreation facility is not permitted, so it's not even listed in the MUT district. So because of these new definitions, we have other changes to other zoning districts. So I just wanted to put them on the screen and highlight the various districts where the new uses are allowed. And the amusement centers would be allowed not only in the MUD, but the B2 and the PUD district. Arena is a conditional use in the I1 and I2 district, as well as the MUD. Indoor the I-1 and I-2 districts. Outdoor rec, that's conditional use in I-1 and I-2. And then outdoor seating, these are all the districts where restaurants are permitted, so it's P1 through P3 in the PUD district. Of note is we are also modifying the definition of two-family dwellings and multiple family dwellings. We wanted to make a distinction between those two uses to allow multiple family to have at least 2 units, but they cannot be stacked. We wanted to make sure it's a more duplex kind of arrangement as well as separate entrances. And then multifamily, we wanted to reduce the number to a minimum of 2 and allow any stacking of units, which we currently have in downtown, and this really does clarify that the permitted use. Staff is recommending approval of this amendment. We believe it does fulfill the goals of the comprehensive plan and addresses what we're looking for in the downtown. And the various amendments are certainly appropriate for the other districts. So staff is advising that the planning commission is recommended to go by approval of the ordinance as presented. I would note that the B1 district, when the ordinance was first advertised, inadvertently omitted outdoor seating, so that has been placed in and is in your packet as well as in the presentation. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from commissioners? Thank you. You have no questions, and I don't see any members of the public present to speak for this. So with that, unless there's any objection, I will request a motion to close the public hearing. Motion second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Time is 7:22. If there's any discussion, and if not, then I will offer a motion to recommend to the governing body approval as presented of zoning ordinance text amendment ZOTA number 23-04. Motion second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Good. Next agenda item is a presentation of the Manassas Park Active Transportation Plan. You'll state your name and affiliation when you're ready for the record, and then please begin the presentation.
Yes, so, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, good evening. My name is Steve Hall. I'm the Transportation Program Manager here at Manassas Park. Been here about 2 years now, just about, and it's my pleasure to be before you tonight. The first ever active transportation plan for the city with Brian Laverty from Mead and Hunt. Brian will be joining us shortly to go over some of the details of the plan, the recommendations, and how we came up with what we did. So this really started shortly after my hire. I became aware that the city was in need of some attention to its trail system, its network, its connectivity. We had recently done the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan, which does speak to trails, but a lot of the actual planning and detailed study had been lacking, I guess, over the course of time. So that was one of the things that became almost immediately part of my focus here. And one of the first things is, obviously you all know, is without a plan, it's hard to accomplish too much. So I set out to find funding for the city to develop what I initially thought would be a trail connectivity plan. We found a source of funding through Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. The Transportation Planning Board oversees the Transportation and Land Use Connections Program, the TLC program. It is a short-term consultant assistance program that can offer $30,000 to $60,000 for planning projects, but also up to $80,000 for design projects, which potentially down the road could be of use for the design for this, but also for other projects. So we did submit 2 applications, one specific for trail connectivity. I received a call back from the COG staff indicating that they were indeed interested in funding it. However, they wanted it to be a larger umbrella, if you will. So they wanted to look at more active transportation as a whole, and specifically trails. So what we're looking at here is really all forms of non-vehicular transportation. So bike, pedestrian, trails, etc. So we began to look at things such as sidewalk and obviously trails, but areas of gaps that extend beyond the trail network in the city. So we did apply. On February 1st, the city's governing body authorized the application, 2 of them, trails connectivity and a transportation master plan. On April 20th, we were notified that the TPP voted to approve $60,000 for an active transportation plan in the city. And again, this is the first such plan in Manassas Park, so quite exciting. The COG team has a series of pre-qualified contractors that typically do a lot of their technical assistance. Clearly, Mead & Hunt is one of them. We received a laundry list of firms that expressed interest in this study, doing the work for us. We received proposals, and myself, Calvin Odell, Director of Community Development and Public Works, and Nikki, Planning and Zoning Administrator, reviewed all of the proposals, and we identified, we scored them, and Mead & Hunt did emerge as the top candidate for a variety of reasons. They're very knowledgeable in the area. This is right in their wheelhouse. They've done a lot of similar work, and they became the consultants that would work with us on this effort. Shortly after, we began kicking off the project. We had 2 kickoff meetings, so this has all happened in the last 8 to 9 months. We had 2 kickoff meetings in September, where we solidified the project scope. We actually looked at everything it was that we wanted to accomplish in this study. We set up the Microsoft Teams site. We knew we had to pull all the existing plans and studies, both locally and in our surrounding jurisdictions. We knew Prince William County was doing an update to its mobility plan. We wanted to get their information, because this plan itself didn't only look at within Manassas Park's municipal boundary, it also looked outside of it to see where we could connect on a larger scale to other jurisdictions. We documented and digitized assets. So, in other words, GIS. We had existing layers of GIS. Some of the trails may not have been digitized, or some of the we had right-of-way layers, obviously, that showed sidewalk, but we got all of that information. We knew we had to conduct in-field site visits, and we also knew as part of the scope we had to do stakeholder outreach, which was a wonderful experience. We identified the deliverables. One of the things we knew we needed was really a kind of action plan, if you will, moving forward. What is it we want to accomplish, and what do we need? What's the low-hanging fruit, short-term, middle-term, longer-term aspirations for active transportation in the city? And then we would have new GIS maps that we could hand out to folks, that we could use our website to identify, hey, this is the bike network, this is the trail network, this is the pedestrian network, etc. And then there will be a summary report. So this is where we started. This first map gives you an idea of our existing network. Everything in orange are the existing sidewalks within the city. Everything in green is our existing trail network. The blue, standing right in front of it, the blue are crosswalks for pedestrians. And then also identify where pedestrian signals. This was, if you will, our base map that we worked from. So we began to look, holistically at, okay, let's take a closer look, a deeper dive into, where are there gaps? And again, this was solidified. Clearly see a little gap right here, the railroad crossing, which everyone knows about, which I'll touch on shortly towards implementation. But certain gaps became clear here, but then certain gaps were also better identified in the field. We had a pretty robust stakeholder outreach platform, if you will. We involved a number of different teams through November and December of 2022. We wanted to do this pretty early on to make sure we captured many of the viewpoints and opinions of various stakeholders that have a stake in active transportation.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, no, I think that.
Okay, we lost you for a second. Yeah, we're back. Thanks.
So we did form actually 5 teams. We started with the city team, with planning, parks and recreation, Chase Fisher and his team, community development, public works, and economic development. We felt all of these agencies, departments within the city have a firm stake in active transportation in one form or another. Public safety in schools, we met with state police, fire and rescue, health, we met with the schools. I should mention each questionnaire, it was more of a back and forth conversation. It wasn't really a questionnaire, but it was very solid meetings that we had with them. Each one was slightly tweaked for each group. But we had public safety in the schools, we had our neighboring jurisdictions, City of Manassas, Prince William, Fairfax. We did lump PDOT in because PDOT has their Prince William office. If you are very familiar with our jurisdictions, we had active transportation advocates. We had in the greater Prince William Trails Coalition. We had active Prince William. We had the Trails and Blueways Council from Prince William, and some other interest groups. And then we had our regional, state, and federal advocates. We had the Virginia Regional Commission, Department of Conservation and Recreation. We did include National Park Service. They did participate. We did have Nova Parks, Fairfax Parks. We had POG, obviously, and Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. And that was a really robust citizen engagement with these. On November 16th, after, I guess we were kind of during some of the citizen outreach, we did conduct a site visit and tour. This lasted the majority of the day. It was a little bit cold, but it was a really good time. We had fun, but we also gathered a lot of information. Mead and Hunt, city representatives, were with us. We did have some of the utility vehicles out in blooms, but we visited Costello Park in the community center. Jay was very instrumental, Chase Fisher, in pointing out some of the items in Costello and Blooms and Signal Hill that needed some attention. We looked at Blooms, Signal Hill, and then we also looked at some other areas of connectivity that we knew, looking at maps, presented some gaps in our network. Down in Park Central, when we look at the VRE parking lot, for example, ideally, you've heard of rails to trails probably, having some sort of backdoor connectivity to Blooms Park would be awesome. Obviously, we don't want any conflict with the rails, but we knew we wanted to look closely at that. Birmingham Drive, backs around the back of the city behind some of the elementary schools. Again, another opportunity there. So we were able to identify and document a lot from that tour that we then carried into some of the development of recommendations and preparation of some of the maps. And I'll give you Brian.
Good evening. As Steve mentioned, I'm Brian Lowry, the project manager with Mead and Hunt. And I'm just going to use the space bar to advance or on here. Okay. So in our recommendation development process, that field visit that Steve just showed you the slide for, that became one of our 3 sort of primary sources of information that went into the development process. The other 2 being the recommendations from prior studies, particularly grants that the city has received for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, for Manassas Drive, and the Park Central. And also the stakeholder input from meetings that I mentioned earlier, including the active Prince William plan, very informative, and they had a lot of good suggestions. quite honestly. And other, and the other stakeholders we met with, where we saw there was a consensus on specific needs. And we didn't just, take those recommendations and throw them in and say those are recommendations. We used all this source material to develop a set of desired connections that we could see within the city and also without the city, between areas of the city and other areas nearby. And then we would compare those to the existing infrastructure and develop gaps analysis. And we came up with 5 categories of recommendations that we sorted all of our thoughts into: pedestrian, trails, bicycle, safety recommendations, which are really related to safety specifically, more so than creating new connections, and some recommendations that are going to require further study down the line. Okay, so this is our map of desired connections. We focused a lot on certain activity centers. There are 3 activity centers defined by NWCOG in the area. COG was the source of the funds. That's important to us. And those are Park Central area, although I don't think it's called Park Central in COG's language. It comes from a few years back before that area acquired that name. Downtown Manassas and the Yorkshire area. And we also defined a number of other, I wouldn't call them second tier, but basically non-COG activity centers, like the corridor where the schools are along Euclid, the corridor along 28, the corridor along Liberia Avenue at the boundary between the county and the city of Manassas. Those are some of them. So the pedestrian facilities recommendations, and all of these, I'm going to show you 5 slides from 5 different categories. None of these are the initial list of what we originally came out with. These have been revised several times over and updated, new things added, some taken out that didn't really make the cut, based on conversations with the city manager, with Steve, with other folks within the city. And so there's 5 recommendations in the pedestrian category. The number one reflects all the recommendations in the HSIP grant for along Manassas Drive. Number 4 is instead of wayfinding, signage, information to provide users with the best routes between the various parks within the city. And numbers 2, 3, and 5 are specific sidewalk gaps that we identified that needed to be addressed. Now, trails, you might ask, what's the difference between pedestrian recommendations and trails? Really, the distinction there is that trails are things that are off-street, whereas our pedestrian category is mainly pedestrian infrastructure that is on the street. Now, these trails, some could be paved. They don't have to be unpaved connections. But these are not bike paths. It's important to say. We've got a bicycle category coming up. There's 9 recommendations in this category, and they focus on connections to and within the parks, more or less. Blooms, Signal Hill, Costello primarily. The bike category, there's 12 recommendations in the bike category. Most are shared use paths off the side of the road. You can do a 10-foot path off one side of the road. One thing the city has as an advantage is a lot of roadways where there is sufficient right of way on one side of the roadway to create that shared use path. And a few are bike lanes. 2 of them are bike lanes. One on Manassas Drive and one on Manassas Drive. Those are in a darker color. And these would make use of the, some others would make use of the Norfolk Southern, the UOSA right-of-way in order to provide trail connections with the city of Manassas, and then also, up here along this area, an area that is already, frankly, used as a trail by a lot of residents. But it has signs up right now that says no trespassing. And so the objective of that would be to make it legal, make it official. You know, and some of these recommendations that you see here, you know, we have both a bike recommendation and a trail recommendation that provides options. So the both will go into the active transportation plan, but down the line, the city has the option of making the bike connection or a trail connection. One example might be along here, you know, utilizing the electrical right of way along Bull Run Creek to make a connection, you know, to and then across Bull Run to connect with the Bull Run Aquaquine Trail, which really would be a great connection to the regional trail system. Then the safety recommendations, there's only two. You know, number one are the recommendations from safety recommendations from the Park Central study, and number two are recommendations from that HSIP application. All other applicants, we initially had several different safety recommendations. As we went through it, a lot of the safety recommendations we felt fit better in one of the other categories. And then, you know, we have a further study category. There are just some needs that are a little bit beyond the scope of this short, as he said, it's an 8-9 month study to develop a plan. But there are some questions that are a little bit thorny and we felt would require eventually a study of their own to address properly. You know, some of those are safe crossing studies. The example that should pop to mind readily for everybody is the railroad tracks. You know, we could recommend a sidewalk there, but it really would be new to city down the line to have a study in depth to determine what the best safe crossing in that area would be, and to include a design component for it as well. You know, design is beyond the scope of this study. Also, the section of 28 within the city, one section of Manassas Drive between 28 and Euclid. Those are all areas where there are a lack of safe crossing, and a specific study in that area to determine where the best safe crossing is and what its design should be would make sense. And then some others within this category, you know, like Euclid Avenue, you can see that connection running, you know, from Liberia all the way up to the high school and middle school. That corridor along there right now, you know, Manassas Park has a wide shared use path along one section of it near the schools. In between in the county, there's really nothing but a sidewalk. And then in the Manassas portion of that corridor, they have added bike lanes. So we thought, you know, rather than just making a recommendation there, down the line, it would make sense to have a joint, you know, effort between the two cities and the county to look at what, for this important corridor, would be the best overall bike and pedestrian approach. And then you see this gigantic area over here, which is just a recognition that, you know, connections across the Bull Run stream to connect to the greater Northern Virginia park system would be good. And looking in the entire area to determine where the best connection would be a good further study item down the line. I probably spent too much time on this one. There's all the recommendations together, the entire plan in one picture. It's a little busy, admittedly. So next steps. As Steve mentioned, our report for the study, or our plan document, is imminent very soon. And it will include a summary of each recommendation, and a one-pager, as you might see in a CIP document. And within that will include a prioritization score out of 10 for each recommendation based on a scoring rubric that we have. They'll be broken into short, medium, and long term. There'll be cost estimations for each project. And I think I'll pass this back to you for the next one.
Thank you, Brian. Your
Steve, turn the mic on.
Oh,
Hello, okay. Next step is implementation. Brian mentioned that we are going to have some things identified with short, mid, and long-term goals, and a couple of things actually Brian may not even be aware of are going on behind the scenes. You heard mention of the HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement Funding. That was occurring, prior to awarding this project, and we were awarded over $1 million for a lot of safety improvements along Manassas Drive, from the western city limit all the way down to Digital, I believe. So this study picked up on some of those recommendations. I'm actually in the process now of applying for transportation alternatives funding through VDOT, which is actually going to look at the railroad crossing in more detail. We do actually have a engineer that was recommended or was available through VDOT to help us do some of that design. I actually reached out to Norfolk Southern today. So we will be coordinating with the railroad, with the engineer to actually get some design, so an application for that sidewalk extension. But part of that extension of the sidewalk is also going to be looking at that crossing. I guess I will start by saying too that I recently, this is perfect timing, VDOT, the Northern Virginia District recently kicked off a bike ped study, a regional study that wants to look at all the existing bike and ped networks in Northern Virginia within the jurisdiction that the district oversees, Fairfax, principally in Manassas Park. And just quite kindly, we'll be getting the GIS data from Brian's group very shortly, and that'll be an input. Actually, you did provide that. I've given that as an input to the study. And then, identification of the funding sources. We will know in a short order. We really have a good idea of, again, what the most important high priority items are. We know that the sidewalk in Park Central, at least on one side of Manassas Drive, is critical. From Park Central to Railroad Drive. That's going to be the subject of a grant application. Possible funding sources, city capital, I know in SCIP we have Police Park resurfacing as part of that. HSIP, Brian mentioned the Highway Safety Improvement Program, that comes back every other year. So we will have additional opportunities for safety-related improvements. Congestion mitigation and air quality, CMAQ. You may think of congestion mitigation and air quality more so related to less vehicles on the roads, but you can apply for trail improvements and make the argument that by having better connectivity, by having, better networks within your city or county or town, that there will be less vehicles. So we were awarded, if we're FY 29, but we were still awarded $260,000 last year for specifically the trail improvements that will implement some of this. I mentioned the transportation alternatives, the sidewalk, that program, that can also go towards funding trails, active transportation, so that'll come back again in 2 years. There's a lot of funding sources out there, and the biggest goal, I think, for us is to fund as much of this as we can through grants with no match, ideally, and getting technical assistance through folks like VDOT, beyond just this study, but they can prepare concept plans and actual design that we can take and use in an application will go a long way. And I'm in conversations with VDOT now about getting some additional technical assistance that we will not have to pay for. So that's good. There are a lot of nonprofit and volunteer groups that I've met through this study, through NVRC, that actually take time and are willing to go ahead and volunteer to do trail connections or to do smaller projects. That's always an opportunity. And then, longer term and bigger picture developer contributions are always an opportunity. The community, the Elms, I believe when they came in years ago, they made a trail connection to Williams Park. So that's an example of where possibly if we get a large development, principally in the county or even a smaller development in the city, we can take a look at the plan and say, hey, we need a connection from X to Y, and we want to really like you
then there's always, the ability to establish more of a policy or regulatory framework if we wanted to include some of this in the comprehensive plan potentially. That could be something we look to amend in the transportation chapter and or Parks and Rec, and then regulatory as well. There's always a potential, but that's it. That's our first plan. I know Brian mentioned the actual report itself will be coming, and as soon as that's available, I'll be sure that you all get a copy. It's been a great time working with Brian and his team. I know a lot of folks in the city play a role in this. So we're getting to the finish line, but it's been an exciting study, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions from commissioners?
I have a question.
Mr. Carter?
I'm not sure how they're numbered, but I guess it would be your slide 14, back to the safety recommendation. Can you go into some depth on that?
Sure. So this came from the highway safety improvement study. So number 2 identified. Well, let me start with number 1. Number 1, Brian mentioned, came primarily. These are from existing studies. So this came from the Complete Street study that was recently done for Park Central, where we identified some speed management issues on Manassas Drive right out here near City Hall. We identified some issues with pedestrian crossings, that there were recommendations made for that. We also looked at opportunities in the future if there are if there's a significant mass of people in Park Central, which ideally we hope for. There's probably going to be additional steps needed, additional signage, additional warning, although it's for citizens, but also for vehicles in that area. So that really captures some of the existing recommendations, number 1, for the Park Central area. Number 2 is the highway safety improvement project that was actually funded. So what we did here was, at that time when we applied, we had again, through VDOT, offered consulting assistance from the group ATCS. So they studied every intersection of Manassas Drive. It actually passed digital. It goes up to Signal Hill, it looks like, and Andrew. But from the west corporate limit all the way to Andrew and Signal Hill to look at, okay, what is this intersection like? And I don't have, I don't think I have it on me, but I want to say there's about 70 crosswalks that were funded. There are a couple dozen ADA handicap ramps that were funded. There are actually about 100 high visibility backplates on the signals that were funded. We have about $90,000, I think, funded for line of sight improvements that will work to trim some of the landscaping that causes line of sight issues for vehicles coming out of certain intersections or pedestrians wanting to cross intersections.
Steve, yes, sir. The HDIP became 2 different recommendations. One in the pedestrian category,
Okay.
and one in the safety category. And the safety category ones with all of the signal related recommendations in there. That's why it's a different extent of Manassas Drive. Whereas if you went to the pedestrian one, you see there's a recommendation that complete basically the entire length of Manassas Drive. And that is, or a little further on both ends. And that is all of the sidewalk gaps and crosswalks and curb cuts.
So that would, I'm sorry, that would include the west side of Manassas Drive, showing it on the pedestrian.
Yes.
So that would basically be some safety included in that.
Oh, absolutely. Again, and I guess I should have thought, looking at this map, that
Yeah, because I thought we have more issues than that little section right there.
You're exactly right. And the HSIP did fund improvements from the corporate limit all the way down to Andrew.
Okay.
So.
We initially, when we started looking at the HDIP applications, our thought process was, well, each individual thing, we're going to throw that in there as a recommendation because it's already funded. It's going to happen. It should be in there. Well, then we would have had about 80 recommendations in our pedestrian category and 50 recommendations in our safety category. to simplify and call the HSIP program, or what was included in the HSIP application, to split it into two buckets and make it a recommendation to each of those.
That will be starting pretty soon. I'm working on putting out the RFP to get the design assistance that we need to then actually do the improvements. So that's coming.
I have one more.
Go ahead.
At the railroad crossing, could it not be whatever we do, incorporated into, let me think how I word this, into the new access from the parking garage over to the railroad station? There's gonna be things so you could route your trail down through that area? Instead of right on Manassas Drive on the street?
That's a very good comment, and the most recent concept that we did for the Transportation Alternatives Program, we have another consultant through VDOT that's actually doing some concept design for us now. We had a call earlier this week. They designed a concept of what's called a switchback ramp. So it's going to provide ADA accessible connectivity from Manassas Drive on the southern side or the eastern side of the tracks, where the new sidewalks sort of extend down to the VRE parking lot as part of the grant application. So that's pretty exciting because right now we just have the stairs. And for a handicapped citizen, visitor, they don't have the ability to obviously get down the stairs. They have to go all the way around Digital Drive. And there's no sidewalk right there. I'm sorry, Railroad Drive, there's no sidewalk there. So I think that answers your question. I mean, if we're going to connect to the parking lot, we will not have a flyover or anything right there. But we need to work with the railroad to make sure what we want to do at the crossing, insofar as a sidewalk would be something that they would accept.
Mr. Collar was talking about the garage, right, with the bridge and maybe signs for pedestrians to walk through our plaza to get to the garage to use that pedestrian bridge.
I guess my thought is, since there's already something in the works there, why do double? If you can route into that and make access there instead of making a whole new thing on Manassas Drive.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
No, it's a valid point. I think we certainly want all the people to come through.
Yeah, we want to push them through the plaza, stuff like the coffee shop, et cetera. So. But there will likely be people who ignore that and just want to take the fastest route across the tracks. I think this east one, we also want to make sure that we have safe crossings there and but certainly from as I understand, but we're going to want to encourage people to use the pedestrian crossing.
Well, there's always going to be people who want to do what they want to do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Henson?
Thank you for the study. I think it's fantastic and long needed. I look forward to the detailed presentation in the future, but just for now, I have a couple questions. But first, to clarify, so on Euclid, we're kind of waiting to hear about from Prince William County and the city of Manassas as to what the best bicycle solution is on Euclid.
The future study.
Yeah, the idea there is that, so recommendation is to do a study specifically for that.
Okay.
It could be it doesn't have to be an elaborate study, but to work together, with city of Manassas and the county to determine what the overall, scope would be there, so you don't have a mishmash of a bike lane that ends, and then a trail starts, and then a shared use path on one side of the road, then maybe the county decides to make a shared use path on the other side of the road. So the recommendation is really to get together and decide what the overall pedestrian bike connection will be along that corridor and make it consistent. Because it's an important corridor linking the two cities and high school.
And I will say that there has been some discussion between the three of us shortly after I started. I know this was a little while ago, but that was identified between the three of us as one of the priorities that we really needed to look at. Again, had some funding to do some studies to look at certain corridors. Unfortunately, that one didn't make the cut. And a lot of that conversation is kind of, I guess, fizzled out a little bit, but I do still talk with representatives from the county and the city quite often, so I can bring that back up. It's certainly something that we need to address. Just, you can see it when you drive down the Euclid. It's piecemeal and it's not well done, so.
Okay, thank you. And what are the bicycle plans for Connor Drive?
Connor Drive, the current extension or the larger?
The extension and basically 28 to the
So
city center.
right now we have a 5-foot. Right now on Connor Drive, you're going to have a 5-foot sidewalk on the southern side next to Birmingham Creek. I guess you could call that a shared use path. However, in most instances, you would think of that as more of a pedestrian sidewalk. So what the plan would be for the Connor Drive extension would have to include bicycle activity on the southbound side of the street from 28. Do not think we had a dedicated bike lane on the plans, but what we would have to do is identify that as the route along Connor Drive southbound. At this point, until we get further development of Connor Drive across from Euclid, I don't think we have an exact connection right now. If you cross Euclid on Connor Drive and go down to Park Central that way, I don't think we have a good access point, like at the Connor House, to get to Park Central that I'm aware of.
You have to cut through,
go up
the parking lot there.
Yeah, see that. So you have to go almost up Euclid and then down Manassas Drive. So that would probably be the preferred route, at least until that other portion of Connor Drive across Euclid gets improved.
And when it does, will it include a bicycle solution?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're talking phase 4?
I lost track of what it is.
Yeah, so the challenge is, so phase 4 is coming, we already reviewed it from a rezoning standpoint, that's going to come to everybody next week as well. Maybe at that time we can look at kind of what, I know there's some pedestrian, connectivity, through the site, but I'm not sure if it's bicycle. But the challenge is it's divided by that schools, the Pennsylvania County school section, so an actual portion of the road that's not even the city. So maybe that's, Connor Drive could be something that's added to the Euclid Avenue discussion with the county about what do we do with that, because the Connor Drive's not all owned by the city. So we don't want a piecemeal strategy there either. I think we want to have a consolidated program.
And I think one of the things too, at minimum of what we should probably do is when we look at the actual network itself, we can identify, because right now the existing connection isn't there from 28. There's the open space. So when the extension is complete, which should be hopefully by the end of this year, we can identify that as a bicycle network that connects to Euclid, and also show that kind of wrapping around Euclid into Park Central. But there's a lot of those points as we talk more about the phase 4 redevelopment. Once that does hopefully come online, if it does, that we can also include that segment of Connor Drive also as part of the network. So, and one of the things I guess about Manassas Park is, as you well know, we don't have a ton of right of way, so a lot of the bike routes in the city are going to have to be almost be shared with vehicles. So share roads, you'll see them in Manassas sometimes with the lines in the street. Now, some may feel that's a safety concern, but I mean it's better than no identified route. So.
Okay. What is the long-term plan for a safe pedestrian crossing over Route 28? Is that addressed in here?
It's listed as a further study.
Okay.
It's just that's a complicated issue that is beyond the scope of an 8-month study that was meant to identify all the needs throughout the city.
Are you saying on Manassas Drive or on Connor Drive?
Just somewhere across 28 and not take your license around.
This year's like the traffic lights are not sufficient for the
For
rest
a pedestrian crossing,
now, I guess you would want some kind of overpass or something.
that would be awesome, yeah. I don't know if it's possible.
Dollar less.
Challenge,
Yeah, but no, it's not big. Even if
I've heard rumblings, obviously, from various places about something such as an overpass. Yeah, obviously there needs to be a number of factors that come into play, whether that would be something to pursue, but one, mainly it's quite expensive. I will say though, I did see some articles out of Prince William, out Hamlet on 15. They had some school children die crossing 15, and they're doing a feasibility study to study how much that would cost to do something like that. So another challenge there is exactly where that would go, because there are so many close jurisdictional boundaries. It goes to the city's role, with the county role, with Manassas City. I don't disagree with you. What I will say is also the Route 28 intersection project, phase 1 that was funded $25 million, is going to be looking at better traffic flow, but it's also going to be looking at some stable pedestrian crossing. Now, a grade separation isn't going to be one of those things, but it is going to look at a better way for pedestrians to get across Route 28 as we go up Route 28. So,
The challenge with those crossings too, you have to be ADA compliant, use elevators as well on those sides. That'd be very expensive for the city to maintain those. But I think it's for further study, right?
Well, not only that, the height of it to accommodate trucks coming and going. I mean, you don't have an elevator
there would need
to accommodate that.
elevator, probably.
Nothing higher than on a typical city street.
And VDOT would then, VDOT would be involved. But I wouldn't rule it out.
right, yeah. We don't want to end up like Haymarket reacting.
I agree. Because it was the one issue last year, I guess.
For the safety recommendations, was there any discussion of the speed limit on Manassas Drive, adjusting it, or?
I know that had come up before, and I won't say we really discussed it a whole lot as part of this thing, but to my knowledge, the speed limit on Manassas Drive, 25-mile-an-hour zone will remain. However, we need to do a better job with signing that. So we did, again, through the, I would say, the improvement in funding, due to the fact that we are going to be getting 3 rectangular rapid flashing beacons as part of that. The complete street study looked at a number of safety enhancements to try to have some better speed calming, better visibility in lines of sight, potentially further down the road, hawk signals, even, or something that'll be considered if we have a mass of people. They're a pretty newer, progressive concept that you'll see them in all other larger, denser cities where there's so many pedestrians that really they justify something special. But we didn't specifically look at reduction of speed.
And my last question is, has there been any discussion on changing Manassas Drive on the east side, take one of the current vehicle lanes and turn it into a share or a bike lane?
Yes. One of the recommendations in here, is a bike. This one, number 10, is in the darker color. That would include, so that's bike lane recommendation with a road diet. So that would be either, it could be a reduction of lanes, or it could just be a narrowing down. Honestly, the lanes are wide enough in there that I think you accomplish that road diet effect.
Yeah.
By just narrowing the lanes more so than reducing them. Now, manager,
Again,
jump in
yeah,
before I get
reducing
that.
the lanes, because there's a number of lanes, just because we hear every time I propose a development, there's concerns about traffic by eliminating one lane. And people are really gonna get this up with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if we can narrow that.
Narrow, yeah.
Still have a safe place.
Yeah, narrowing lanes has been proven to make people drive slow.
There is funding, with the road diet, is pretty popular fuzzy term around transportation. Honestly, there are a number of funding sources, projects funded that look at road diets and, reducing the width of lanes to promote bike and ped activity, reducing speeds. And that is one area of the city. I made a comment that so much of our existing right of way, we're constrained because the homes are built up on the, yards to the sidewalk, western part of the city, the older residential areas. There's not a whole lot we can do other than share those without getting into people's property. But on the eastern part of the city, there is an opportunity, for potentially a reduction in some of the width to accommodate the large language.
Well, thank you, John.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Commissioner Beckens?
On slide 7, you list a number of stakeholders who were involved. And the person who actually was sort of like walking around the city and sort of the trail, I was just wondering, what about broader community engagement outreach for understanding what's important to the community? And it's great that Fairfax and Prince William County and all these other sort of acronyms are on the list, but what about the people who are actually going to use what you want to do?
I think that's a great point. I think what we wanted to do initially was certainly capture so many of the citizens, at least from my understanding, comments had been captured a lot in the existing studies that have been done. You make a very valid point. I think it's quite an opportunity for us to engage with the public, to share with them some of what we've done here. We did not do a quote-unquote citizen outreach portion of this, given the short time frame, the quick turnaround. I think it's something that, given we have informational items tonight, it's not too late to do something like that. But I certainly agree. This will be shared on our social media, shared on our website. I think down the road we do look for the governing body to potentially take some action to approve this as more like an official plan rather than just an informal internal document. I mean, it's going to be kind of my marching orders moving forward, but your point is well taken.
I have one more.
Commissioner Cullen?
Back to your trails, and I'm like Michael, all the shareholders that were involved. And I'm not sure the name of the trail. It runs through Paul's Church all the way out to Loudon. Did you all look at?
WNOD.
Is it, okay, I was thinking the B&O, some railroad thing, because it does follow the railroad all the way out. So I'm sure you looked at what, I mean, because it goes through multiple jurisdictions to make the entire trail.
I mean, as far as did we look at
Just
specific
you look to
ways
see how they did what they did to make it all happen, just as a reference. And it should have been included in some of your shareholders here or stakeholders.
We didn't pull any plans of that trail in as like one of our reference documents per se. I mean, I think it was in the back, certainly it was in the back of my mind because I'm very familiar with that trail.
Yeah, down to Mount Vernon. I know there's a bike trail that goes forever from Alexandria all the way down to Mount Vernon.
Right.
So there's multiple areas that you can compare to. Just a thought.
Well, and one similarity to WNOD is the former right-of-way of the Washington and Old Dominion Railroad, which was a trolley line. And we have a rail right-of-way that there have been some preliminary discussions with Norfolk Southern about using some of their excess right-of-way as a corridor to make a connection along from the Manassas station to the Manassas Park station and on further east across the Bull Run Creek to Fairfax County. Yeah, that'd be a great regional connection.
It really would, and then just to kind of piggyback on that, the issue I think we have when we compare,
our trail or the north and southern lines of WMD, the north and southern line is still active.
Yeah.
So there presents some issues with liability and safety and Norfolk Southern, you know, when we brought this up, it's quick to say, oh, hold on a second. We don't want people crossing the tracks. So, you know, obviously we don't, but we are looking, we're in conversations with the Commision now, with their aerial power lines that go right through the DRE parking lot and extend all the way along the tracks and up to the bull run, about getting some easement language included in that, to where our citizens and visitors to the park could access that trail legally, or that open space area legally, on foot, mountain bike, and eventually wrap right into Woods Park. And then on a larger scale, eventually, hopefully from Woods Park over into Fairfax, and then, you know, you start to kind of see that connectivity established. And then on the opposite end, from here, you know, down into Manassas and maybe Clifton.
Yeah, because right behind Williams Park is overlooked by Clifton, you just go right in through there.
Right. Yeah, in an ideal world, we would have a connection all the way from downtown Park Central all the way into Clifton, ideally. There's some of the discussions, obviously, that we'll continue to have. Some of the, you know, what we can control certainly is what's in Manassas Park, and the ability for us to get access, you know, through Dominion. And you know, you'll see a lot of times with wide right of way that's maintained by Dominion. It's perfect. They're large,
It's the same here.
line. It's already mowed. It's perfect for people to kind of walk through. And they do allow that in lots of places. So we're discussing.
Well, take a lesson from what Fairfax just did a couple of weeks ago, where now their walking trail that has a Jersey wall separating them from Route 66 right there. I mean, I'm walking here and the cars are zooming by right here, that's not what we want for sure. Yeah, I mean, they just done that.
Where is that?
Right over on Route 66 and the Vienna, right, coming up from the Beltway.
Okay.
And part of it is exposed to 66, the rest is behind the big wall. Just a thought. Don't put us in traffic. We want to continue walking.
Other questions? Thank you very much for the presentation this evening. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Very good. Moving on. No unfinished business, no report of special committees, and informational update from the public staff. Mr. Barry.
I just have a few items of note. There is going to be a residential household hazardous waste drop-off on June 24th, which is 2 Saturdays from now, from 8 to noon, at 331 Manassas Drive, our public works. So, try to get that word out. It's always handy to have some way to get rid of these materials. Well, for residential household hazardous waste, like oil paint or batteries, probably be one. But there is what they're taking on the website, so there's a really nice description of what they will take and what they will not take. Correct. So that's where I'm talking about batteries. I can't remember whether or not those will be permitted, but electronics, yes, I'm not taking them.
And what was the date again?
June 24th is that. Okay, and then just last note, Steve and I have been involved in the traffic impact analysis study for the vacant property at the intersection of Manassas Drive and Signal View Drive. So there is going to be an impending development there. And since it's in Prince William, VDOT and the applicant as well as their traffic engineer, we did have a meeting with them. So we will be monitoring that. That's just the initial application for the transportation analysis. But there certainly will be some formal application to Prince William, and we'll get a copy of the plan, and you and I will make sure that we get our comments in. There's some very good pedestrian connections that we want to make sure happen. So, we'll be keeping an eye on that. And then, you did mention that HSIP program and analysis. I certainly will, pass that on to you if you have a study, and I'd be happy to, provide that to you because there is a lot of detail in there. It was mentioned several times during the report. Active transportation. Thank you.
Any questions from commissioners? Thank you very much. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion second. Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. The time is 8:20.
Everybody. Thank you so much.